3.6. So the fact that we've been able to stay stable with a slight increase is good and positive for the school district. The reason we mention membership as a part of this presentation is that most of our finances are driven by membership and how many students we have in the system. So a drop in enrollment typically leads to less revenue for the district, and districts have to account for that if a situation like that happens. For comparison's sake, if the Cedarburg School District saw a drop of 3.6%, that'd be roughly about 100 less FTE for our district, which would represent $1 million in our revenue limit cap that we'd have less of. So the fact that we're able to remain stable during the pandemic is good for our financial stability. Next slide. As we look at property values that make up the base of our tax levy, there are 6 municipalities in the Cedarburg School District. 90% of the valuation is made up of the city and the town of Cedarburg. And our total value for this year is getting just over $2.9 billion for this year. Next slide. We look at growth of local property values over time. It has grown pretty dramatically. Look at roughly 10 years ago, it was just over $2.09 billion, and for this year, it's getting close to $3 billion. That represents a growth of 8% over last year. And so for the Cedarburg School District, a growing tax base results in a larger tax base for the district to administer the tax levy across each year. Growth typically represents either rising home values or new developments or a combination of both. So as a result, we're seeing that growth continue in the Cedarburg School District over time. Next slide. We took a look at the tax levy rate. Like I said, we saw a big influx of state aid this year, and that's going to have an impact on the tax levy rate for 21-22. The proposed tax levy rate for this year would be set at $7.43. That would represent a 15% drop over last year, which would be one of the largest drops we've seen since the late 90s. This would be a $1.36 drop from last year, when it was $8.79. And it's also important to note that this tax levy does include debt payments for our $59.8 million referendum that was approved by the community in 2018. So as a recap, like I said, fund balance being brought to just over $9.4 million for this year in the general fund, which is 27% of the general fund expenses for 2021. A balanced budget is being proposed in the general fund, but that is primarily as a result of supplanting local costs for the federal ESSER grants. A 15% drop in the tax levy rate for this year, which would be a $1.36 drop from last year. A slight increase of 3 FTE to membership to bring that total to 2,991. And then reinstatement of the contribution to Fund 46 with a deposit of $300,000 scheduled for 21-22. Next slide. This presentation is just a brief summary of the 21-22 budget. As Mr. Leach said, there is a budget hearing report that goes into more detail on specific line items, comparison data over time, and breaking down different areas of the budget in more detail based on their type and source for this year. And with that, I'll open to questions or comments from the board.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Can you remind me the ESSER grants, what's the timetable on those? Is there currently 3-5 years or?
So 3 rounds of ESSER grants were approved, ESSER 1, 2, and 3. ESSER 1 we've already claimed. That was just over $50,000, so we claimed that last year on COVID-related expenses. ESSER 2, that is going to be closer to $800,000. That final number is still being determined. Most of that's going to be used on COVID expenses we had last year. So additional staff we had, equipment expenses, upgrades to our ventilation system, pieces like that, cleaning system. That we have until the end of next year to use. And then ESSER 3, which the final amount still is yet to be determined for Cedarburg, we have till September 30th, 2024 to use those funds up. And that should be the largest distribution, is what we're projecting so far. Yep.
I'd like to just take a moment to thank you, Ben, for the work you put in. This was great reading. I was as we walked through the slides, this is good news. I mean, I feel as a board member, this is really good for our community. tax levies, always a good thing to see for residents of the community, so I appreciate all the effort you put into this, and it's a great presentation. Thank you.
I agree, thank you for all your work.
Ben, just a question on slide 11, local property values. We're talking about increasing property values and also how that's balanced with growth in the community. From your perspective, what kind of growth are you seeing? I mean, I drive around, or you're anticipating to see. I drive around, other developments are happening today in the property off Washington, which is moving along pretty quickly. Developments north of 60. How do you think that's going to impact this particular slide in the future?
Yeah, we do a study every 2 to 3 years with a third-party firm to project out enrollment and growth in the district. Last we did was about 3 years ago. We're anticipating doing another one this year. When we did the one a couple years ago, they did indicate significant growth in the community, for that to continue. And so we're keeping tabs on that as we're detailed in terms of the areas that we hit in our boundary and how it impact our system. The next one we'll do, obviously, will include all the recent developments and then keep our eye on any newer ones that are being approved by different municipalities. There's a larger one going through the system right now that would have an impact on our system in terms of adding a lot of family homes to our community. So based on recent trends we've seen, we expect that to continue in the future and have an impact on our system, both from a property value standpoint, but also enrollment as well.
I think you mentioned once, isn't there on average a head count you expect for new development in terms of enrollment? There's some sort of basic formula or percentage?
Yeah, we did a case study on one of the developments near Webster and what that yielded in terms of number of homes relative to number of students that came out of that development, and it ended up being just over one per home.
Oh, yeah.
1.1, I think, some change like that. So a little bit higher than what probably saw outside the area, another kind of studies like that. So yeah, typically when we see a development like that that's focused on family homes, stuff like that, multifamily homes, that's going to yield something to us that's going to result in more students in the system for sure.
That'll be fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
30 kids.
Yep. Yeah. So it's something we keep very close eye on.
Yeah.
Any other board comment? We'll open to public comment at this point. If there's anyone wishing to ask questions or speak, please raise your hand. If you just want to come up, reminder to state your name, whether or not you're a resident or a taxpayer, and what part of the budget you're.
I'm Elizabeth Charlin, 1602 Skyline Drive, Cedarburg. Had a couple comments on various parts of the budget, if that's okay?
Okay.
Go under 3 minutes. So thank you, Mr. Irwin, for the detailed budget presentation. You took a very complex topic and made it easier to understand. And I'm happy to hear that the district has a balanced budget coming for this upcoming fiscal year. And as a taxpayer, I appreciate the significant tax levy bill decrease. So one example the district provided was that a family who owns a home valued at $300,000 can expect over $400 off their property taxes this year. That's really significant, and hopefully federal grants won't be required to balance the budget next year. The 2021-22 school year will be the 3rd year of a 3-year teacher compensation plan that was mentioned, approved by the board. In that 3 years, the district invested over $600,000 into teacher salaries. I'd like to see an even greater investment in rewarding top-tier, high-achieving teachers even more generously in the next plan, either via salary increases or end-of-year bonuses, because dollars spent directly in the classroom rather than expanding buildings or administration truly has the biggest impact on Cedarburg students. And a part of last year and this year's budget has been COVID mitigation practices, and I just wanted to say thank you to the current board for your handling of the controversial masking decision and handing that over to the parents and allowing parents to determine what is in the best interest of their children's physical and mental health. And also thank you for this year's close contact quarantine policy that allows parents to choose to send their healthy children to school. Those policies have paved the way towards a transition back to normal and have resulted in some truly incredible moments for our students and our community, including the 8th grade Camp Minikani camping trip, choir and band concerts, cheering bands at football games, field trips, homecoming festivities. These are things that were taken for granted in 2019, and they have been a really big deal for kids and their families to experience this year. And these experiences are a result of board policies that were guided by a transition to normal and trusting in parents. Thank you.
Anyone else? Pam? Again, please state your name, whether a resident or taxpayer, and the part of the budget.
Tammy Holzer, North 33, West 5487 Hamilton Road. I'm a taxpayer in the city of Cedarburg. I'd like to thank the board and thank the administration for balancing the budget. I'm gonna go off of what Elizabeth said too, that it's really nice to see that we have a balanced budget. As a taxpayer in the city of Cedarburg, our property taxes are going down, which is really, really great to see. I am concerned a little bit about a lot of the legal fees that are starting to happen because of some anger in the district about mitigation measures. But I wanted to tell you that I'm supportive of the mitigation measures that the Cedarburg School District did this year, and they're returning to normal. I have a student in 5th grade at Westlawn and a sophomore at CHS. Both were very happy to attend school in person last year. But they repeatedly commented how they missed seeing faces, difficulty hearing peers, difficulty hearing their teachers. They missed a lot of events and a lot of things were canceled. My children were really not thriving last year and it was very heartbreaking and difficult to see. This year, the school year has been exponentially different. My boys see faces, smiles, emotions. They hear their teachers. They're learning this year much more than they were in the past because of all the steps that were in place. Activities are resuming and my kids are thriving physically and emotionally. My sophomore even gets to return to the theater, a place he dearly loves, maskless to perform as Mr. Green in the CHS production of Clue in just a few weeks. And again, I'm happy to say that my children are thriving. Just yesterday, the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association joined together to declare a national state of emergency in children's mental health and directly links the pandemic to significantly exacerbating the situation. So as a parent in this district, along with my husband, we would like to thank you for allowing parents to have a voice and a choice in what they feel is best for their children. Thank you.
The public comment?
Hi, my name is Heather Vedder. I live at W61 and 383 Washington Avenue in Cedarburg, resident with currently 3 children in the school district. And I also wanted to say thank you for that presentation. That was really easy to follow, and I really, really look forward to having the drop in my taxes. That's going to be great. I also wanted to say thank you to the current board for returning our kids to normal this year. I had 3 in the district last year, all in elementary school. And last year was hard for all of them, to the point where towards the end I really had wished I had pulled my children out and kept them home. So this year is just a vast improvement. They get to see their friends' faces, they get to hang out with their friends, and because of your return to normal, I chaperoned a kindergarten field trip last Thursday, and I get to go to River Edge tomorrow morning with 5th grade class. So thank you for returning our kids to normal this year. I appreciate everything you do.
Okay, public comment?
Hi, Rick Harshner, West 61 North 840 Arbor Drive in Cedarburg. Question on the Fund 46. Now, the gymnasium floor is probably something that had been anticipated many years ago prior to the funding to replace it. Are there anything else in the district similar to that you're looking at 2 years from now, 3 years from now, that was going to impact Fund 46?
Yep, so each P&G meeting that we have, building and grounds meeting that we have, John Coster, our Director of Building and Grounds, will present the 10-year maintenance plan. and on that, it's pretty exhaustive. There's items for each year. They probably total, like $500,000 to $600,000 per year that he has all planned out. And so it's a very detailed plan, so we kind of know where we're going to go. But as he says, you can only plan out so far in the future, and so really there's things we have earmarked as we look forward down the road. The only reason we included it in this year's budget as opposed to taking it on Fund 46 is because that timetable for 46 is not up yet. Otherwise, that'd be something we'd take out of there, and that was on his plan for future expenses, larger future expenses.
Okay, thank you.
And every year we replace some of our roofs,
Yeah.
of our buildings. Every single year they replace a section of roof someplace.
And we tend not to replace the entire roof because of the huge cost, so it's done in sections, so that's an ongoing thing every year is certain parts of a building's roof that gets replaced, and those are very expensive.
I have one more question related to that.
The mitigation measures related to COVID, I imagine there's a lot of HVAC work that's been done. Is that something out of the ESSER funds, or is that something out of the capital improvement funds?
Most of the equipment costs that we had was probably around $300,000, and that was HVAC system plus cleaning equipment. Most of that came out of last year's budget, and we'll make a claim on all those expenses out of using ESSER funds.
Okay, thank you.
Other public comment? Yep.
First, I did want to just thank everybody. Thank you for the presentation. After looking through all the detail, you did a nice job of summarizing it to make it easy to understand.
You
I
can
just-
state your name, please.
Oh, Michelle Rischel, 516 West Highland. I'm a taxpayer in the school district. I just wanted to thank you all for the work that you did on the budget. Thank you for controlling the expenses, the staff training. I agree with Elizabeth. I would love to see good teachers rewarded as much as possible. That's important. Thank you for the work that you do to scrutinize curriculum. Thank you for enforcing procedures, even when others who may not see both sides of issues want to demonize you for it. Thank you for using logic to make decisions on COVID policy. Thank you for not acting as a hospital to students, but as a school system. Thank you for listening to parents. You'll never make everyone happy all of the time, but we appreciate you standing strong and listening to concerns from everybody. I've never been prouder of a school board than I am of this school board right now. Thank you so much.
Other public comment?
Connie Kincaid, Cedarburg resident, parent, taxpayer, all of that. I had sent an email to Mr. Irwin in regards to the legal fees. I, of course, as several parents and individuals here, believe we do need to keep our teachers here, retain them as well as our support staff. My specific question, Mr. Irwin, if you're allowed to expound, line item 24, legal fees. Is there an actual that was expected for this past year versus what the total was? I understand it's not by line item. I understand that that's not something that our general public can be privy to, but was there an actual as to where it's at right now that the public can be made aware of?
In terms of how much we're budgeting for this year?
What was budgeted for last year and where we're at this year?
We're budgeting $50,000 for legal expenses for this year. Last year, I believe we budgeted around the same. I'll have to get back to you with the exact amount, just to make sure I'm correct. But we did go over budget on that one. Various reasons for that, but that's something we are hoping will return closer to budget for this year.
So would you mind just the numbers? I understand, obviously, we can't know the exacts, but as someone who's just reading through this after a long day, for 24, line item 24, the actual expenses versus the budget, $33,877.22. Can you just break down those two numbers, what's one and the one next to it? Again, I apologize, it's just been a long day, so I would like to be clearer, but I'm not.
So we look at the budget worksheet, which is on page 9 in the budget hearing report. What she's referring to is just the line items listed on there, so those are larger items we have as part of the budget as we build the budget for this year. Doesn't include everything, obviously. And the expenses we have for last year, it's just comparing those actual expenses to what we budgeted for this fiscal year. So line item number 24, legal fees that we had, like I said, went over budget. So we expect that instead of costing $33,000 over budget, that hopefully to get closer to budget for this year.
Thank you. I just do wanna say it's really helpful to sit in on those personnel and finance committee meetings. And I would appreciate if we could have comment time added to those so that an individual can ask these questions of Mr. Irwin during those smaller group times. So thank you again for the time it takes to put this together.
Welcome.
Other public comment? Please state your name, whether you're a resident, and the part of the budget you're addressing.
Tim McGuire, 359 West Thornapple Lane, Grafton, been part of the Cedarburg School District. My one question is on your debt load for the bond issues and things like that. Is that on variable rate instruments or is that fixed?
So we have 3 different phases of the loan that we took out, and they're all 20 years. They're all phased out over 20 years, so some are a little bit shorter than that. The rates depend on each one of those borrows, and they do fluctuate, by year. And so it's hard to pinpoint an exact percentage on it, but overall, the combined rate for all of them is just over 3%. We did the borrows over the last couple of years, and so it was an opportune time for us to go out to bid for a lot of those. So we got favorable bids back from them. So we're pretty happy where we ended up with them. Most of the projections we had going into the referendum were around 4.5%. So down closer to 3% is it saved us quite a bit in terms of the debt load we'd have to carry.
On your general operating expenses, what are you using as your best guess for inflation rates?
So the biggest thing that impacts our budget as a result of inflation will be the consumer price index, as we use that for compensation increases for next year. That number should be out January or February, but as of right now, the projection is right around 4%, which would be one of the highest rates we've seen in quite a while.
Thank you.
Other public comments or questions? Any other public comment questions? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We're gonna take about a 5-minute recess, and then we'll start the board meeting. 6:44.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that.
I will debate whether to do that.
Are you in the head end?
No, when you come right off of Willowbrook?
Yeah. Make it right?
No, right left.
You go left.
It's only there. The third house over, like the yellow building.
Which one are you saying?
Yellow building.
Okay, our house used to be yellow, and then we got the hill damage, and now it's all gray sided. So like, we live right out on Crescent. Oh, and then we're facing the house behind us is, Willowbrook Park.
Oh, yeah.
I was part of this, we built, I was the budget
Oh,
regional
wow.
project.
Yeah.
Okay.
We moved there about a year ago.
Oh, we've been there that long.
Yeah.
We've been there Our kids just turned 8, we moved in there, I was pregnant, so.
I was talking to a neighbor and found out that that all was an apple orchard before it was developed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A couple houses on Sheboygan Road, including the farmhouse, pulling on the land.
Oh, okay.
So some of the original apple trees scattered around in that area.
How come our streets aren't like Methodist and
you
like
think-
Gala?
yeah, you think they would be.
I know, exactly, we're moving.
Willowbrook used to be really across the street.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, well, look for you. Do you for a walk around the neighborhood or do you
Yeah,
have a dog you walk around?
and I run,
Okay.
and sometimes depending on how far I'm running, if I don't finish off, I'll go and circle around the park.
Sure.
And come back then.
Okay.
So I'll do that.
Our cars are always driving. Gotta have
Sitting where I do, I see a lot of regulars walking.
I more pressure. But you more so, yeah.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Oh, cool. Well, I met you tonight and then you said Arbor. And I think I heard you talking to another, you said Arbor.
Yeah.
Who in your life? Just most important. He goes, I know, street talk. Sorry for being weird.
Oh, that's okay.
I would have sat in the front.
Okay, we'll call the regular board meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Cedarburg School Board and is a public meeting. Prior notice has been placed in the district and additional copies reported to the city and town of Cedarburg as well as the news graphic and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We get to say the Pledge of Allegiance again.
All right. Today we have the following proclamations. The state of Wisconsin has declared the following proclamations. October 11 through 15 of 2021 is National School Lunch Week. October 1 to 31, 2021 is Keeping Kids Safe Online Month. And October 1 to 31, 2021 is also Gifted Education Month. All proclamations are posted on the district website.
This evening, board members, I'm asking you to approve the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from the September 19th board meeting, the budget financial information, which includes the summary of accounts, check register, check detail, the credit card transaction report, and also the personnel report. Mr. Fleming.
We have one part-time teacher contract we're asking for approval this evening for Lisa Vick, instructional media position at Parkview. And we have our first teacher retirement request for the end of this year. Mary Porter, after 38 years in the district, was requesting retirement.
38 years now.
It's a long time.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Superintendent notes?
Thank you. This evening, I have a short presentation, and board members, you have that presentation in your packet, and it's also board docs. Those of you who are viewing in the audience, it's behind me. I apologize for those who are sitting at the lower level. We weren't able to get a screen down there, but hopefully you'll be able to see the presentation. We're excited to be at this point of the school year. Here we are at the end of October, and we always start every presentation with the kids and parents, or something that makes us feel good. And this opening slide is a slide from our community open house. We had that about 2 weeks ago. It was a pleasure to greet parents, students, graduates, former teachers, staff, and community members, and board members during this open house. It was an opportunity for us to showcase our spaces throughout all 5 buildings. Overall, it was well received and well attended by our community members. I want to thank all those who assisted, the administration, representatives who were present throughout the day from 9 to 3. Karen Egloff for all her work on the details of the presentation. John Coster and his crew for making certain our facilities look great. And lastly, to the board members who attended, we greatly appreciate your attendance. This slide actually features 2 graduates of our system. That's Casey Bull, the high school principal, and that's Joe Riddleman and his family. And Joe is also a graduate of our system. And Joe was on our Tech Ed Advisory Committee when we started to evaluate our Tech Ed spaces. So a shout out to Joe for all that he's done for the district. The next slide, it's always great to celebrate some of the successes that we've had, and we've had a number of them. We're only into October, and I won't read through this slide in its entirety, but there are a lot of highlights on this slide that are worth us just paying attention to. We know we are in an environment that is somewhat challenging still, but as you heard many of the speakers mention, it's great to be able to see our students' smiling faces and engage in activities that you would engage in a regular school year. I have to give a shout out to the high school and that first bullet, the #1 ACT score in the state for a public high school. It's for a comprehensive high school with more than 15 students. There was a high school in northern Wisconsin that tested 14 students, but for a comprehensive public high school, we had the #1 ACT score from last year in the state. That's a great accomplishment given all that we were dealing with last year to come out on top. I think it just goes to show you that our teachers, students, and parents have an unwavering focus on student achievement and getting the best and bringing the best to the classroom. So congratulations to the high school and to the entire district for accomplishing that huge recognition. Other items on here that are certainly worthy of note, our fall sports season is still in progress. There's a few teams that are in the postseason right now and having great success, but we went through the fall season without having any cancellations. It was a great, successful fall season for our sports teams. Our marching band placed 5th at the AA division, and you can see a picture of them on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And we had 4 CHS students accepted to the WCDA All-State Treble Clef Choir, which is wonderful. The 8th grade students had a great experience at Camp Minneconne, which they could not do last year, they did this year. And you can see that young man rock climbing down the lower left-hand picture on the slide. And we had a 2nd place Wisconsin Parks Forest sticker recipient, Gia, who's up in the right-hand corner of this PowerPoint, a great accomplishment. Niche released their rankings, and our schools, K schools did extremely well, and more details on that will be forthcoming. And the second bullet from the bottom, the Cedarburg School District received an excellence award in STEM education. I had the pleasure of going to a conference today, and I sat in on the lunch where the awards banquet took place, and there were 4 different categories that were recognized, and we received recognition in the area of education. And that recognition was for our great work in promoting STEM throughout our system. Alan Groth, Kirsten Collins, and Krista Padberg were there, or Penrod, and were able to participate in that recognition. And we were in a room with representatives from healthcare. GE was there, we had Harley Davidson was there, Northwestern Mutual was there. It was a very respectable crowd in that room this morning, and we were thrilled to be a part of that recognition. And a shout out goes to the teachers, students, and parents, and our administrative team for really embedding that STEM education into our system. So that's a great recognition for us.
Todd, could you explain to the people in the room what STEM means? People might not know that.
Sure, yeah. So it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Sometimes you'll see the A thrown in there for arts, and it's called STEAM. In fact, our Cedarburg Education Foundation is having the fall gala, and they're putting the A in STEM. They call it STEAM, and a lot of their energy is being focused on that A and resources for the arts to integrate it into that STEM mindset, if you will. So the science, technology, and engineering, mathematics, STEM, we have curriculum that we implemented through the curriculum committee that starts as early as 4K, 4-year-old kindergarten, and is embedded all the way up through high school. And even students who are not interested in science, technology, engineering, mathematics are exposed to that engineering mindset. That's good thinking even if you're not going into that area. And our students have responded, and you've seen this over the years with our coding club getting recognized as being one of the world winners in that experiment, that experience they had out at MIT, and our robotics team winning worlds at some competition. So this has been ongoing, and the focus that our teachers, our parents, and the community have put on STEM and STEAM has really given way to these recognitions. So we weren't out there hunting for this. It was something that we had an opportunity, we applied, and we were recognized for it. So congratulations to the entire district for being recognized for that STEM award. And the last bullet there is the community open house, just something that I already mentioned, a great success two weeks ago. So we know that COVID continues to require our attention, but we are learning a great deal on how to manage through the challenges while not compromising on our experiences for our students. Our commitments have not changed. We continue to adjust our mitigation measures. Those are all posted on our website, as is our data dashboard, which is posted on our website. This particular slide, it's the mitigation and instructional continuum slide. And Brenda, if you click on that, we'll open up the document that's on this slide. Board members, I handed out the one-pager, which gives you a bit more detail on this slide. This is something that we presented at the board last month. The practices noted on this document continue to morph, and that's why, and it's expected to continue to morph. We're in an environment where things continue to evolve.
Is that why it's still in the draft form?
That's why it's still in the draft form. You can take draft off of it, but I thought I would do that after the board meeting, after I field any questions. But I can tell you there's going to be some tweaks to it, just because we're continuing to evolve, and that's expected in this environment. There's nothing that's solid when we're dealing with the unknown of how we're navigating through this virus. The one thing I can tell you is that we're committed to quality in-person program, and that hasn't changed. The practices noted on this doc will continue to morph as we expect the environment to continue to change a bit. The doc is a continuum, meaning it is not a step-by-step process. The doc is intended to be a guide. It's fluid, meaning we progress through this continuum, but it doesn't mean we're going through every step on this. We may not implement a particular step and leap over a step. We are truly trying to be as agile as possible to continue to provide and will provide a quality in-person instruction program. We are learning that each situation is unique and how we respond varies based on the school, on the grade level, and even on classes within a grade level. We are positioning ourselves to be as flexible as possible as we move through this year, and to this date, it's been relatively successful. On this continuum, as I stated, it says draft because it is a draft. We'll constantly be tweaking this throughout the year. Adjustments on the stock have been made since the last board meeting. We are seeing that we are applying the mitigation and instructional continuum more to the elementary level at this time. The secondary level it has a good routine, a good flow, and there's minimal disruptions in those environments. So from this point on, when I speak, I'm speaking mostly about the elementary. Because the high school, I'll say right now, we are in a good position. The administration's doing a wonderful job, parents, teachers, students, and we're in a good position. That's not to say that some of these mitigations would not kick in at the high school, but for the purpose of this conversation, I'm focusing from this point on the elementary school. The most significant adjustments have occurred on the instructional continuum. So when you look at this doc, there's two sides. There's the mitigation strategies on the left, and there's the instructional plan on the right-hand side. The items on the left-hand side, the mitigation measures, haven't changed much from the last time I presented this to the board. We had 5 cells, and as we began to work through some of the situations we were faced with on the left-hand side, the cells needed to be readjusted. So now instead of having 5 cells under mitigation, you see that there are 4 colored cells on the left-hand side. Most of the mitigation measures that were presented last time are still in there. It just made sense that we cluster them differently based on our current practice. So just to reiterate, we do not have a virtual option available this year. We are 100% in person. We are 100% in person. With that said, there are times when we need temporary instructional options available for our elementary isolated students. Isolated students are students who must remain home because they have a positive test result. So isolated students is what I'm talking about from this point on. When a student is isolated, we would like to provide a lens, a view-only option into the classroom for the duration of that isolation. So if I'm a student, I'm positive, and I have to remain home for 7 days to 10 days, we want to provide a lens, which means a view only into the classroom so the student can continue to keep up with his peers. The teachers see this as a more efficient way of providing instruction versus writing out the instructions for the lesson. The student not getting the questions answered at that time, waiting till he or she returns to the classroom 7 days later, and then playing somewhat catch up. The idea here is that the lens will provide an opportunity for the student to move with his or her peers for the duration of that isolation. And once that isolation is over, then that lens closes because the student is back in the classroom. So when you look at that instructional plan on the right-hand side, you can see in the middle of that paper, it says live stream access. That's the lens option there. The second option that we talked about last time was when there's a significant number of positive cases in a class, we would pivot to a blended environment. So when we have a number of students who are positive, who have a positive case result, a positive test result, I should say, and they have to quarantine, they have to go home and be isolated. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the words, but they have to go home and be isolated. That means they cannot come back in for a period of 7 to 10 days. We want to provide a blended option for those students. That means there's cameras on, audio's on, and the teacher's interacting with the students who are in front of him or her, and interacting with the students who are at home, those isolated students. That's when that threshold, we cross the threshold when there's a larger number of isolated cases at home. And again, from an instructional standpoint, it makes the most sense. If we're going to try to keep our kids moving along the continuum, and we're going to try to minimize the amount of time that this teacher has to spend closing that gap when they return and playing catch up, this is the option that makes the most sense. How long will that blended window stay open? It would stay open until the last student in that cluster returns. So we have that going on right now, and today was the last day for a window to be open. And it was open for 5 days because we crossed the threshold of students being isolated, and the teacher ran a blended environment. So they were instructing the kids that were in front of them and instructing the kids that were at home. And today was the last day for that in that particular class, because that last student who was isolated from that cluster returns tomorrow. So the worry that I think some of us have had is that when you open up the window, it becomes a slippery slope, and more may choose that option just to be home and receive the lens or the virtual, or I should say the blended option. By having a definite end time on it, it doesn't afford that slippery slope to occur. We can close the window down when that last isolated case returns. It has proven so far that we've done it twice. Today was the second time, and it closed today on window. It's proven successful. The administrative team has vetted this probably no less than 10, 12 times. The last time was yesterday at 4 o'clock, and the entire administration is here. And I did ask the elementary principals to be prepared to speak to this if we had any questions. And Angela was, she raised her hand right away. I couldn't wait to get up here and podium and speak. Angela had volunteered to field any questions, but I would be the one who would start if you have any questions around this proposed instructional continuum that we are presenting tonight. Any questions you may have, and I'm again talking to the right side of this document, instructional continuum.
I see it as a creative solution. I mean, we talked before, we're in the education business, and we talked about test scores and things like that, and 7 to 10 days missing of school is a lot of time. I mean, most times people have called you out a day or two. 7 to 10 days is a lot of education. So I think the approach of helping those kids come along during those 7 to 10 days and getting them back into the classroom as soon as we can, and as soon as their sickness is over, makes a ton of sense that they're not as far behind. And the last thing you want is a kid to get frustrated that they're just not getting it anymore because they missed 10 days of school, 8 days of school or something like that. So I think it's a good approach, and again, it's focusing on our educational outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
I agree, Kevin, if I may. It does make sense when you look at the instructional continuum. And in elementary, we know that students are less independent than that of the secondary level. They're more dependent on instructional interaction. And parents, they want their kids to be in school. The vast majority are like, we want our kids in school. That's where they learn best, in front of the classroom, in front of the teacher, in person with their peers. And when we've seen situations where parents have self-quarantined, most of the time they are returning in 2 to 3 days. Most of them pull the kids out because they want to see if there's going to be additional cases that break within the classroom. So when we do have a positive case in the classroom and we open that lens, the student who is positive, who's at home, and if there's 2 or 3 people who want to self-quarantine, they will have the option to access that lens as well. But when that isolated student returns, that lens closes and those students who are self-quarantined have to return as well. Because we are asking parents, if you are in a position where you believe your child has been in close contact, to self-quarantine. And so to provide them access, as long as we're following the isolated timeline, makes sense. And it does keep everyone fully engaged, and I think it provides the best opportunity for our kids to return and for teachers not to have to spend time trying to close that gap and catch them up.
Bifurcate their classes and try to catch people up.
Correct.
Well, yeah, that was one of the main problems with the virtual option, where you had teachers that had, instead of 4 or 5 cohorts, had 20 cohorts. And this would prevent that from happening.
Correct. It's temporary, just to be clear. This is not, and we are in person, we do not offer virtual. This is a temporary solution that we would deploy this year to, because it benefits students. Educationally, it's a sound practice.
I am concerned about the slippery slope a bit. So maybe what we could do is give it a test run here for a month and see how it goes.
Sure. So we've done the blended, and that's been tight. So that's worked already twice, where we've had, we crossed the threshold, students have been home on isolation. We opened that blended opportunity so the teachers engaging with the kids on the computer at home, engaging in front. The last isolated student returns, which is, for example, today in one of our classrooms, that window shuts down. The lens, Dave, that you're referring to is something which would be new to us. So we can certainly try that, and I can report back at the next board meeting how that's going, and give you an update.
Yeah, that again is triggered by the window is based on the isolated.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the lens is for a student with a COVID positive, and anyone who chooses to quarantine, or just the student, when there's only one student in the class who's afforded that lens?
So it's the isolated student and those who would choose to self-quarantine. And as I,
Individual classroom.
in that particular classroom. And so if there is a classroom where, there is no positive cases, there's no one isolated, there's no lens open in that classroom. And that lens would close down when that isolated student returns. And as I had said, most often parents who are self-isolating, again, I'm speaking specifically the elementary, they tend to be home about 2 to 3 days because they want to see what's happening in the classroom. But that doesn't mean we won't get some who take this option. I'm just making, it becomes a mitigation option as well, because when you do have cases that are occurring in the classroom, it affords us opportunity to social distance a bit more and put other measures in place. So it is also, you can look at it as a mitigation measure. My perspective is that it's truly benefits the kids from the instructions.
So like a live stream, it's like a volume difference, right? The live stream is more for a student who maybe it's 1 or 2, and there's, tell me again what the difference is between live stream and blended.
If you look in the middle of the paper on the right-hand side, a lens into the classroom will be provided with the following. Allow students to see and hear lesson components.
Yeah.
So there is not that interaction
Right.
between the teacher and the students.
And that's more for kids like self-quarantining, or if they've had some sort of.
Or a single isolated.
Or an isolated
case.
1 or 2 kids. Yeah, like smaller volume, essentially. Whereas blended, as the example we had recently was, there was a little bit more impact in the classroom, more students impacted, and so at that point, the call was made for blended.
Correct.
Which I think is so smart, right? Like, we have this continuum, and there's choice there too for the parents to say, I wanna utilize here in this case because of that isolation live stream, or, now we're at a point where it's blended, and if they wanna be part of that blended model outside, they have that choice as well. Sounds like, right?
Knowing that it would close at the.
Exactly,
At the end
up
of
until that point, yep.
I think you might have misspoken, you said self-isolated, did you mean?
Oh, look at that, I blended all day, yeah. So isolated.
So how do you determine the isolated? Is that the positive test result, and then how many days is it?
It varies, it tends to be 7 to 10 days.
Okay.
And I know Nicole, I saw here, 7 to 10 days is what, less, more.
Isolation's 10 days, quarantine 7 to 10.
And then on the blended, the threshold, what is that threshold?
So what we've been doing right now is we have used 20% of the students in a classroom. So if you were going to look at a class of 20, for example, if there was a cluster of 4 students that were had positive test results, then we would flip to them. That does not mean that the 4 students have test results all on the same day. It can mean over the course of a few days. And that's how it works. It's not like everyone goes and said, oh, we're all tested positive on this particular day. We have Rick and I may test positive and get the results, and it's confirmed on Monday. And Kevin would on the following day, and then Kate, and next thing you know. And the principals have done an outstanding job, so has Nicole and the administration. We continue to dial up the mitigation measures on the left. Because generally when you do see 2 positive test results in a class, you can anticipate there's probably gonna be another coming. And so we begin to dial up the mitigation measures on the left and prepare for potentially going to a blended environment.
And what's good too is, right, it's 1 classroom, it's not 5 classrooms, 10 classrooms, entire schools, right? It's looking at that classroom individually and being able to respond.
Correct.
I think it's really smart.
The threshold is based on isolated, so positive, so 20% of the class is positive.
For the blended.
Yeah, and that's kind of does it depend on the class, and maybe, or is it kind of a solid rule? Like, you know what I mean, like, are there some classes?
It was not set in stone when we had one of the other classes, wasn't quite there. And I think we moved it just a little bit earlier.
Correct, there was one.
There was one that we were one person short, but the people that were out, we were concerned there would be another test positive. So the administration met and did it.
Yeah, to Rick's point, we're becoming more proficient in understanding how this works in our classrooms, and so we can begin to anticipate some of this. And so, to Rick's comment, there was one that wasn't quite at 20%. We made the call, but it did get there the next day because you could just see the pattern where it was going.
With the lens option, if the student chooses quarantine because of that, and they're gonna be marked present, I mean, is there any monitoring? Because that's a hard environment, I think,
Yeah.
you know, to just sit and watch, there's no engagement back and forth.
So,
I mean, is
yeah.
there any monitoring that student is watching?
So that's a great question, Laura, and we haven't gone to the lens yet. But in speaking with the administrators, the principals in particular, I think that what we're expecting is the student to log on. You're going to see the student there, and the work completion is going to be part of that explanation. And when we see that completion, we see the student being present there, then that would be marked as a student being present. And right now, what happens is that the rub, if you will, we ask parents to help and self-quarantine. They self-quarantine and they're marked absent, and they can't engage in learning. And they're like, that just is a bit of a part of self.
Other questions? Comments? This is not an action item, it's not a votable,
No.
it's just an update.
I have one comment. Number one ACT in the high school, just one little bullet point, that should be okay.
We've been contacted by news outfits for other reasons, and we give them that, and they're not interested in reporting on the ACT score. Yeah.
So you'll keep us appraised on
Yep.
how we work and work.
So my thinking, Dave, is as all of you know, the presentations on COVID have become shorter and more concise and compacted. And my thinking is, unless something changes significantly, my next report at the next board meeting will just be on that lens. Nope, that would be it. Thank you.
It takes us to public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak tonight? Just checking before I read all this. I'm getting old, I have to put on the cheaters for it. I think we need bigger writing here, friend. Any district member, staff member, resident, or parent of a student enrolled in the district may comment during the public portion of a meeting per board policy 0167.3. For this meeting, the community may address the board during public comment section of the meeting regarding agenda items under section 6, recommendations only, specifically B through G. These items include 2021-2022 tax levy certification, 2022 district health insurance renewal, resolution authorizing temporary borrowing in amount not to exceed $3 million pursuant to 67.128A1 Wisconsin statute. 2021-2022 Ozaki apprenticeship 66.0301 agreement, policy updates, and donations. In the past, the state attorney general issued guidance on how government bodies such as school boards should conduct public comment portions of their meetings. This guidance was given to assist the governmental bodies in avoiding violations of the state's open meetings law. The essence of the open meeting law guidance is that unless a topic is brought forward for the board is publicly noticed, no significant discussion can be held on that item. Instead, the topic may be listed on a future meeting agenda, whereby discussion could be held. The reason for the Attorney General's guidance is to ensure that all interested parties have equal opportunity and advance notice to participate in discussions with the full school board. Per policy 01673, the board has the authority to determine if public comment may be taken, and if allowed, on what portion of the agenda comment will be received. For tonight's meeting, items listed on the agenda under section 6, recommendations B through G, open dialogue may occur between the individuals and the public and the board members. Per school policy 0144.2, The board will respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law. This includes but is not limited to information under current or imminent litigation, or student-specific information per board policy 8330. If your item is not listed on the agenda under B through G and you want to have a discussion, you're encouraged to contact the district superintendent to request that it's put on a public agenda in the future. As always, you're encouraged to contact board members outside the public meeting setting with your comments or concerns. Please note, board members are limited to public engagement via email as noted in board policy 0167.5. Please make your comments to the board and not to the individuals in the audience. As per board policy 167.3, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this is a public meeting and we ask everyone to address one another with courtesy and respect that you would like to receive in return. When you approach the microphone, please state your name, address for the record. Please state which agenda item, B through G, you will be commenting on so that I don't have to interrupt you, because I've been accused of interrupting people, but if you tell me what it is, it'll be easier. If you are under the age of 18 and you're a student in Cedarburg schools, please only state your first name. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the district's website. Now, we had a sign up and we had people who spoke at the public hearing too, so if I call your name and you don't intend to speak now, just let me know and we'll move to the next meeting. The first name on the list is Connie Kincaid.
Connie Kincaid, N75 W7255 Linden Street, Cedarburg. Board members, tonight I will be speaking specifically about items G and B under recommendations. In doing so, I will also reference portions of policy 0123, philosophy of the board. At present, board policy allows any district staff member, resident, or parent of a student enrolled in the district to comment during the public portion of a meeting. Additionally, the current policy allows these same individuals to address topics that are within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board. The policy does not state that individuals are only allowed to speak on recommendations or on solely actionable items. One purpose of public comment is to maintain two-way communication with citizens of the district. In order for a board to act as a truly representative body for citizens in all matters related to programs and operations, you need to hear from those citizens. It is the responsibility of the board president or presiding officer to understand that they are granted authority on when or if public comment occurs, but not on what the scope may be. If an item falls within reasonable jurisdiction, a citizen of the district may address the board. Examples of items within reasonable jurisdiction include achievement gaps, staff retention, student morale and well-being, safety, equitable and accessible learning opportunities for all students, fiscal responsibility, and much more. To allow the highest level of communication amongst citizens and the board, I am requesting that the only proposed addition to policy number 0167.3, public comment, be that of including the word students to item B. Current bylaws allow residents to speak for 3 minutes each, and public comment can be stopped at 30 minutes should the board so choose. Having the expectation of a board willing to listen to residents for 30 minutes at each and every meeting is not too much to ask. Leave item G as it stands, thus allowing citizens present this evening or in future meetings to bring their aspirations and concerns about the district to the attention of the board without unnecessary restrictions in place. I have been interrupted. I appreciate the time to share my thoughts on this agenda item.
Matt McManus.
I'm Matt McManus. I live at N30 W6863 Lincoln Boulevard. My wife and I have 2 children in the district, both at Webster. I'm also here to speak about item 6F on the agenda. In particular, I want to speak about code number 0167.3, public comment at board meetings. I have urged the board both not to adopt the code, but I also urge you, even beyond what Connie said, to like proactively allow public comment. So the board requires that the public may comment during any open meeting. Right now it's a shall, or a may, and I think it should be a shall. Transparency to me and input from the public during open meeting is critical in strengthening the decision making of anybody. And I think nowhere in open government is open government more important than in our public schools. I know that state law doesn't require this, but I also understand, and I tell my kids this, there's a big difference between what you can do and what you should do. The proposed change and the board's current practices really serve to silence citizens, and I can't think of a single rational public policy reason to support the board's recent practices or its proposed policy. Our own state senator, Dewey Strobel, is currently sponsoring a bill that's in the legislature that supporters claim would require more transparency of school boards related to curriculum decisions. And it's ironic to me that our school board is moving in the opposite direction. So I wanted to use my remaining time to ask the board members, I'll start with Ms. Strobel since you're on the end, do you support the current code as revised? And if so, why do you support kind of silencing the public and not allowing us to speak at every meeting?
So you're not required.
You are not required to
Answer any questions. But
She can if she wants to. I
You
think she
can,
should.
right, we're just letting her know, new board member.
That's the point of this.
Question, sorry.
I wanna know, are you in support of the proposed revised code 0167.3? And if so, why do you support silencing citizens when I think it should be more transparent and allow us to speak at every meeting?
Before I comment on the proposed change, I'm just gonna say I am in full support of, citizens being allowed to speak. That's all I'm gonna say at this point.
Okay, then I would really recommend us go back and rewrite this policy to require that every meeting. You can put limits on the time, but I think everybody should be able to speak at every meeting on anything within the jurisdiction of the board. So Ms. Pedrick, I've got time left, I can ask you the same question. Do you support the current policy, and if so, why?
I do, and I was gonna speak to it during our, committee report that we're talking about policy. So I'll talk about it more when we get to that item.
Okay, I hope there's a really vigorous debate about this.
Kristen Burkhardt?
Alright, Kristen Burkhardt, W67 and 542 Evergreen. I can hit my house with a P grade thing from here. The first time I ever spoke during a public comment portion of a public meeting, it was years ago in front of City Council, and it was a concern I had about a downtown establishment called August Weber House. I don't need to explain how that went down, I think we all know how that went down. Also recently, a gentleman during public comment portion at a city council meeting had a concern about the safety of residents that walk along Sheboygan Road where there's no sidewalk, it's north of Henry Court. And these residents walk to their houses in the Glen and in Cedar Place. That council member that represents that district followed up with those residents, it became a formal agenda item, and guess what's on our budget now? A sidewalk. My point is that public comment works and it's needed. I have kids in this district and I'm speaking as a constituent and a parent, but I'm also an elected representative of this community. So I'm here to offer my thoughts based on that experience. Listening, engaging, and interacting with our constituents is our job. I know that during open public comment you are not allowed to engage, I understand that, but when I say engaging in interaction, you should be following up with constituents that speak at meetings, opening up a dialogue via email, etc. When my residents reach out to me, it may be criticism, maybe really hard criticism, and I might not agree with them, but I always respond because it is my job just as it is yours. However, you've all but eliminated public comment for meetings, and in my experience, and I'm not sure about others, but my emails aren't being replied to or acknowledged. So how do you expect the public to voice their concerns? Agenda items are at the sole discretion of the board president. That's not an unusual policy, but when the public isn't being heard, isn't allowed to speak, important issues are not being added to the agenda and therefore not discussed and swept under the rug.
Now I get it, it has been a heavy year for all of us, including you. Imagine if you took the energy that we spend hating on each other and crafting comments on Facebook and actually apply those towards working together and finding common ground and common solutions. I understand that's very Pollyanna of me, but I think we could be used as a positive example throughout the greater Milwaukee area and even the state, and maybe we even end up on the news for a positive during this time. But in order for that to happen, we need leadership at the top, and that is you. You need to set the example of leadership and progress by listening and engaging with your constituency, and you can't do that by limiting public comment. I'm asking you to vote no to the revisions suggested by the policy committee regarding public comment and allow time for open public comment at every board meeting. Thank you.
Heather Vedder?
Grace Welcome, good.
Grace Welcome, good. Eliana Acosta?
And my last name is pronounced Acosta, O like in Costa Rica.
Okay, apologize.
My name is Eliana Acosta, and I am a high school student, and I will be talking on EC. The staff will provide a wide range of educational offerings and options to ensure all students achieve and excel as they should, show pride in their heritage, and respect the heritage of others. Members of the board, this should sound familiar because it is in your mission of the district statement, but you have not been following through with that. And your statement, this is your statement, and you are not listening to students of color. We are asking for your help, and you are silencing us. All I'm asking is that in this community, I don't be judged on the color of my skin, but on the content of my character. And I know, members of the board, you have heard my story. I have come up here and spoke on my story multiple times. And how would you feel, members of the board, if you had a child and your child had self-harm marks on their body? Every time they looked at their body, they saw scars that they gave themselves. How would you feel? Because they were getting bullied. You would make a change, wouldn't you? But for me, a student of color, you silence me. You silence me. How dare you? I am furious. I am upset. I am being silenced. You would make a change for your child, but you wouldn't make a change for me. I need you to stop silencing me and my people. I need it to stop. Because I am a proud descendant of the Taino indigenous tribe, and I know my ancestors are proud of me for using my voice, and I will continue to use my voice until I am heard. Now, Cedarburg Board, you need to make a change, and we need to talk. We need to talk as a community. Me, you, the members of the board, the teachers, the students at other schools. We are a part of this district. We are a community. We are a family. But you are silencing some of us. And I am upset at you guys for failing at your job. You need to do better for students like me. Also, thank you to the student acceptance team for designing my shirt.
May I like to ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Did you file a complaint with the district about any of these behaviors?
I have multiple times, and I have been since the 5th grade.
And has the district responded?
No.
The district has not responded to your complaints?
No, not at all. And Mr. Berg invited me to do something one time, and he asked me, how would you, if you gave me one word to sell Cedarburg, how would you sell it? And I couldn't give him a word, because how can you sell something that is broken?
I guess my question though is, has your family filed a complaint? Have you made any kind of formal complaint? And if
Yes.
you're saying yes, and there's been no response whatsoever?
Yes, my family has made some formal
If I could
complaints.
interrupt, as her parent, there was a response after we finally spoke at public meeting, but not since the beginning of us
Okay.
bringing
There was, okay.
I mean, I
just wanted
can
to make
give you
sure.
examples if you
I
would
just wanna
like,
make sure that there was a response, thank you.
but it was delayed.
Andrea Acosta? Did I get it right that time? Thank you.
Andrea Costa, W52N244 Pierce Avenue. I am just speaking in regards mostly to a few items under number F. First, I think we're all exhausted at this point, you can agree. And things have gotten contentious, and I can understand the board's frustration in regards to public comment. However, public comment is there for a reason. And maybe, just maybe, if the board would have responded to any of the requests for over a year and a half to put certain items on the agenda, or to speak with parents or children, students, in regards to some issues over a number of years, that maybe, if any of those would have ever been responded to, public comment wouldn't have need to go as far as it did. I think that needs to be addressed. In regards to the questions that you were asking my daughter, there has been issues for a number of years, at least 6 years, that have been documented in this district with my children. We did not have anyone from this district to reach out and talk to us until after we made comments in the public comment portion of a school board meeting. So you were very well aware of what was going on, you chose to do nothing about it. The last time my 12-year-old son spoke at a school board meeting, I feel it was missed an important and profound statement that he made. He had said that he was upset about the things that were said to him and friends of his that were students of color. But he was also concerned about the students making the statements. He had said, who is checking in on these kids at home to find out what is going on with them as to why they are coming to school and saying these comments to us? No one addressed that statement. So my question is to the board, if you are not addressing the issues for the students of color that are coming forth and saying that there are issues, and you're not addressing the issues for the kids making the statements, who are you representing, taking care of, and advocating for? Because you're not doing it on either side from a student's perspective. Also, I feel that in regards to the staff, this board, and the district, you can ignore the requests, again, for a number of years for these issues to be handled. You can try to put your head in the sand, but when I have alumni confirming that has happened for years, I have staff members contacting me to say, everything you're saying is true, and then your HR person tells me that I'm lying, when I have phone records to prove it, that is setting a precedent of the environment that you are creating, that you are saying to your parents, we're not gonna believe what you say. You're saying to your students, we're not gonna believe your parents, so we're not going to believe you either. Because when my daughter's in that meeting and hears that comment to her mother, that is what she walks away from that meeting with. So now who is she going to take her complaints to?
Please, I've let you guys go quite a bit beyond the actual agenda item, so can you please wrap it to
Well,
what
that is about
the item
your
of
staff,
discussion?
the employment of your professional staff. So when your HR person is saying that in a meeting to a parent.
I have to say, if you have a complaint about a member of our staff, to please make that to our.
To who, the HR person?
No, make it to our superintendent so that it can be investigated.
Well, my emails go unanswered to you as well.
So if you can make sure that happens that way, but a public meeting is not, according to what was read and what's currently in the policy, is not to make accusations against staff members.
It's not an accusation.
Okay, it is. It is until it's investigated. So I.
There's an eyewitness, so.
Okay. So I just wanna clarify that.
Okay.
Erica Turner?
Not here.
She's not here, okay. Elizabeth Charlene?
Alright, Elizabeth Charlene, 1602 Skyline Drive, Cedarburg. Agenda item F, policy 2240 and policy 2260. So hello again, I'd like to discuss policy 2240, controversial issues in the classroom. I support approving the updates to this policy as written in the attachment to today's agenda. As written in the policy, the board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues, provided that their use in the instructional program A is related to the instructional goals of the course of study and level of maturity of the students, and B does not indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. The policy goes on from there. The key word here is indoctrination. I'd like to note that the previous version stated does not tend to indoctrinate, and it has been revised to simply say does not indoctrinate. I'd like to think that everyone in the room can agree that we do not want to indoctrinate students with controversial rhetoric from the right or the left. The district has done a phenomenal job helping students reach high levels of academic performance despite the time spent out of the classroom in 2020. Todd just announced that our high schoolers scored first in the state on the ACT exam. In the forward mathematics test taken by the 3rd through 8th graders, the scores that were just released are better than ever. Statewide, only 34% of students are proficient in math, and in Cedarburg, it's 73%, like phenomenal. Whereas neighboring districts are seeing significant learning loss reflected in their test scores, Cedarburg is doing something right and should continue down the path of rejecting indoctrination in our classrooms. There has been public pressure at past meetings to hire a full-time equity director and perform a top-to-bottom audit, curriculum audit, done through the lens of equity. While not directly stated, the obvious goal of these requests is to fundamentally transform the district and its curriculum. Per policy 2260, non-discrimination and equal access educational opportunity, all Cedarburg students will be provided an equal educational opportunity regardless of race, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, sexual orientation, and disability. Please continue down the path of rejecting all forms of racism and harassment while fostering kindness, respectfulness, empathy, and critical thinking skills in our students. Please approve the policy rejecting indoctrination and continue the district's pursuit of excellence.
John Q. Are there others wishing to speak that didn't sign up previously? Please state your name and address for the record and which of the items B through G you are addressing.
Yes, my name is Jennifer Meldman. I live at 300 Bobolink Avenue, Grafton, Wisconsin, 53024. I have 2 children in the district. And I'm going to be addressing letter G, related to the public comment. So I would request that you keep the policy as it currently is, and that you do not pass the policy that is on the table tonight, which would restrict the vote, the comment. The phrase slippery slope has come up a couple of times tonight. I believe, Mr. Creer, you brought up the slippery slope in regards to classroom learning, virtual learning, not wanting that to go too far. And that's how I feel about the public comment with the slippery slope. Okay, there's a balance that we need to strike. And if we go onto the other side of the slope, then we've gone too far. And if we go too far, what are we doing? We're shutting people out, we're closing our ears, we're not listening, we're making people angry, we're creating conflict and controversy, more of it, which we certainly no longer need any more of that in this district. Yes, we had amazing ACT scores. Woohoo. I read it and I said, great, but then I remembered Mr. Kennedy, something you said at an earlier board meeting this year, that at a conference that you went to, they said that one of the greatest predictors of success for students, for people, is that they have grit. So ACT, I was listening very carefully to what you're saying. And that's the thing. Scores are simply that, just scores. Okay? What creates success, what makes a difference in the world, what makes positive changes happen, what makes things wonderful is whether a child has a sense of grit, the belief that they can make a difference, the belief that they can stand up for what they believe in. And that's true of the members of this community as well. If we want Cedarburg to continue to be a leading district, well, we have to embrace the grit that all of the members of the community are showing. We should embrace it. We should say thank you. I was a teacher. Parents criticized me sometimes. I didn't like it. Okay, I listened. I didn't have to change, but I could listen. I could say thank you. I'll consider it. Listening. All people are asking is for you to listen. You don't have to change your policies. They just want their voice to be heard.
Any other questions?
Kate Erickson, West 16 North, 982 Glenwood Drive. So I'm going to be speaking tonight on policy 0167.3 and policy 2240. I attended the entire policy meeting that was held, and I was there when the Neola rep confirmed that the district had not been following its bylaws on what can be spoken on about at school board meetings during open comment. The only limiting that could be done was when and how long. You may have a right to change the policy, but you have an obligation to listen to the community. I think people get rights and obligations confused sometimes. If items aren't being put on the agenda, how can they be addressed in public comment? And if they're not addressed in public comment and public comment is restricted, how can those items be brought forward, whether they are topics of criticism or praise? Okay? You cannot hide from problems. You cannot say, well, I'm sick of hearing them, we're not going to allow them anymore. Running away from problems just makes them bigger. And obviously with some of the public comment we've seen tonight, things are coming to a head. And if we want to reduce negative press, listening and taking action is probably the best cause. So I strongly suggest you do not change section G in 167.3 and allow the community to have a voice. Now getting to policy 2240, this is where my over a decade in higher education comes into play. Indoctrination is a very difficult thing to define. Okay? If you are going to take on a policy where you are going to argue that we are not going to indoctrinate students, then it's a good thing you're revising your social studies curriculum because the textbooks you're currently using are indoctrination. Okay? My specialty is history, American history, Native American history, state of Wisconsin history. ACT scores do not matter anymore. Colleges are doing away with them. Within the next 5 years, students will not be taking those tests anymore, and there will be nothing for the district to tout. Okay? Indoctrination is something very difficult to define, and I suggest you leave that item off of the approved policies until further discussion on what that means can be had. I want to be proud of the district that I live in. I want my child to stay in this district. As Haudenosaunee o Neotaga, I want my child to learn about herself in school. That doesn't happen right now. So please, when you're looking at the policies 167.3, I suggest you not change section G, and I suggest that you leave policy 2240 off the list of approvals until indoctrination and what that education looks like can be properly defined. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it should be noted though that you stated at that meeting, Richard said one thing. After that, we received written email from him stating that we are in compliance with it.
No, I actually have a full recording, and if he was asked several times, several different ways.
He sent an email to the district afterwards, after someone had reached out to him, stating that after
Well,
reading it, he does not think it's that way. So I just want to clarify that.
Board member Padberg and Cryer asked him multiple times different ways to define it, and each time he said the only right the president had was to limit the amount of time and when,
Okay, and
according to
I understand that, but
current
I'm just letting
bylaws.
you know that after that, we received notice of something different than that, what was said that night at the meeting. Any other public comment?
Not only that, but he could have been wrong too, he did actually say that.
He could be wrong.
He could be wrong again.
It's a slippery slope.
Hi. My name's Ryan Yeager, N63 W5805 Columbia Road. I'd like to say on G, it is absolutely vital that you listen. It's just that simple. Prior to this school year starting, I had concerns about the mitigation efforts underway. Not one of you answered the question. I emailed every single one of you. You said thanks for reaching out. I wasn't even making a comment, I was asking questions. I wanted to know about the policies. As a result, I pulled my child from the school. After that, somebody reached out to me, and we had a conversation about it. But it's absolutely vital that you guys listen. You can't shut down the public comments. It's your jobs. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Is anyone else? You spoke once.
I understand if there's no one else, I do know that I have to wait for everyone else.
Right.
So I'm aware of that.
Yeah. No, we are, that's for the budget. We are exceeding the 30 minutes. I've let it go beyond the 30 minutes.
And I understand, you can stop
So,
us for it.
so I mean, if someone wants to move to extend it and let Connie speak again a second time, we can do that. If not, we'll move on to the rest of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to extend it another, is there anyone else, just one person?
That's now you're gonna get
Two
multiple.
people? I make a motion to extend it by 6 minutes.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
I should have 2. So we will close public comment at this point. Takes us to recommendations. Letter A is taking action regarding the budget.
This would be the formal action to approve the 21-22 original budget as proposed during the budget hearing.
Motion?
I move to recommend the 2021-22 budget as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had, hey, for you to say move to approve.
Move to
What did I
approve.
say?
Right.
Move to approve.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the budget. Any other discussion? I just do wanna say thank you for all the work on it and the finance committee for all of your work, cause most people don't realize that's an ongoing, year-long process. When do you start your next meeting for next year's budget?
Right away.
It's a year-long process to make the budget for the following year. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
as was mentioned in the budget hearing, the proposed tax levy rate, for next year would be $7.43. The total tax, levy for the district would be $22,103,011 for this year. And so we're looking for a motion to approve.
So, motion, did I hear second? Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. C, take action regarding the 2022 district health insurance renewal.
So our health insurance for the district renews January 1, 2022. So at this point of the year, we have gone through the process of receiving the renewal proposal from our current provider. And something a little bit different we did this year was actually put the coverage out to market as well to include other providers. Our initial proposal from our current provider, which is WCA, which was a 13.5% increase for this year. So obviously not ideal. So as part of the process of going out to market, we got quotes from other providers as well. There was also a negotiation process with our current provider and the other ones who submitted bids. In the end, we received 2 other bids in addition to the renewal from our current provider, WCA, one from Humana and one from Network Health. At that point, we did an analysis of what changing providers would do for our system and the impact it would have on our employees. Through that, we eliminated one provider, Network Health, just because the network coverage would be a lot different than our current provider. But we continue to have conversations, negotiations with Humana, because their coverage network is virtually identical to our current provider. So once we went through that process, our current provider, WCA, brought down their bid to 11.5%, and then we received a 6% renewal bid from Humana for next year. We engaged the staff through an insurance committee to get their feedback, and then had a discussion through the personnel and finance committee as well as to weigh the different options. We felt comfortable enough with switching providers and going with Humana for next year, especially due to the financial difference between 11.5% increase to a 6% increase. So tonight we are bringing forward a recommendation to renew health insurance plan with Humana with a 6% increase for our premiums for next year.
Is it pretty much the same plan?
Yep, essentially the same plan, in terms of deductibles, co-pays, all those different pieces.
And the NICE health service is the new item. We didn't have that before, right? I think you talked about that previously coming in, there could be a discount, so that would be the first year.
Yep, so both WCA and Humana included NICE with their bids. In fact, they put enough of a value on it that if we did not include it, the premium renewal will actually increase by 2%. So they see a value in it. We discussed this through P&F a little bit as well. But it's something we want to offer to our staff as well as in terms of some kind of virtual / on-site clinic that we could use to help complement our current coverage that would still exist. People could still go to their primary doctor and no issues there, but we really view it as a supplementary service to our current offering.
And when does that start?
That would start January 1. And so the process, if approved, the first one would be communication to the staff about the change and the provider and what that means for everyone. After that, we start working on wellness pieces and what that means for the new provider. That's probably the biggest difference between WCA and Humana. They have a little bit different approach to wellness, and so getting that communication out, presenting that to staff, and what that looks like would be kind of our December timeline. And then January, we'd engage with the NICE healthcare and how that can be used and utilized across the board. We could communicate all these pieces immediately with the staff, but we figured those additional pieces, we want to dedicate a whole presentation on those just so they're not lost in the mix.
What was your projected cost? I know usually you have like a projected expectation around what you think insurance will increase.
Usually, like this time of the year, when I start working on the budget for the upcoming year, I built in 5%. However, we do get monthly reports on our usage for our health plan based on premium contributions versus total medical costs. And so as we saw more and more of those as we began this year, I revised that increase to 8%. And so started trending on that, and then the summer I upped it budget again, and just trying to factor in that, so, bringing it down to 6%, works better with our budget. Obviously, 0% is ideal, but, with the current market, that's just very hard to attain.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the renewal of the health plans plan to Humana with a 6% rate increase for 2022.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Item D, resolution for the temporary borrowing. Not to exceed 3.
So as I touched on in the budget hearing, as a result of our cash flow for revenue, that comes in large chunks. Even though we have a fund balance of over $10.4 million, during the months between November and April, our cash flow we project out would actually go into the negative as a result of not receiving revenue but having ongoing expenses during that time. So each year, for quite a long time, I suppose, we've had the cash flow borrowed during that period of time. At this point, and with the current market, it's less of a financial impact on the district since interest rates are historically low. And we were able to reduce our total borrowing amount a little bit from last year as a result of what we've added to fund balance over the last 2 years. And so the bids we put out last week, and we received those bids this morning. We received 3 bids from Northland Securities, BOK Financial Securities, and Baird. And we are recommending accepting the bid from BOK Financial Securities with a net effective rate of 0.37882%. Total cost of the district for that borrow for the year would be $12,750.
0.37%.
Yes.
Well, you do home loans? Just kidding.
I think someone make a motion before they change their mind.
I'll make a motion to approve, the borrow, was it BOK Financial?
Yep.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Item E, Ozaki Youth Apprenticeship Agreement.
Good evening. We are here tonight to present to the board the annual 21-22 Ozaki Youth Apprenticeship 660301 agreement. We come to you annually with this, and it's a great service for our students, and we have many participate. It's a small annual fee. It's an Ozaki County activity for our students to engage with local businesses and organizations and do partnerships and internships. So, and it's a consortium amongst our Ozaki area school district. So the money involved in this, the $4,000, goes to a great service for our students. So I'm bringing that to you tonight for approval.
I'll move to approve.
I have a question. Is there a limit for each district, how many students can do this?
So, no, they'll do as many as they're able to place. We have a minimum of 8, and we are currently at 11. We're only in October, so we always exceed our 8 and go well. We sometimes double that number.
I'll move to approve. It's a great program for our kids.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Brings us to F.
Tonight we are here, and I will take input from the board in terms of how they want to approach item F. This is, we had a policy committee recently, and these are the policies that were moved to the board for approval based on the committee input and vote. And so we are asking for approval of these tonight, but you can hear, but.
Who's the chair of that committee now?
That's me.
Mr. Kirk.
Because I was out of it.
Yeah.
I would, I'd like to, make a statement. I did miss that meeting, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. But I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the policies as presented with the exception of, item 167.3, which would be tabled for a month so that the full board could meet and discuss this, or as many of the board members can make it as possible, to discuss it. Maybe we don't even make a change, maybe we do, but I think we could build consensus and potentially clarify the intent.
Yeah, we, so this is where this all got kind of messed up, I guess. there was no intent, and actually there's no language to actually change the policy. The intent on the amendment was simply to, basically, we're trying to correct some confusion, and apparently failed. So that policy states that the board may provide a period of public comment. So there's no requirement, as some of the people pointed out here, there is no requirement that the board do that, okay? Item A of that policy says that the public comment is permitted as indicated on the order of business, that would be the agenda, and or at the discretion of the presiding officer. But then we had G, which said that the discussion was to stay within the range of jurisdiction of the board. Basically, it has to cover, you can only, would only include items that are within the board's jurisdiction. So some people were confused about that. They thought that canceled out the board's discretion to even have public comment. So we were attempting to link the public comment to the agenda, as item A says. So the agenda could say, open public comment on anything within the board's jurisdiction, or it could say limited to action items. It reflects the practice that the board's always engaged in. So I think there are two separate questions. There's one, do we want to keep doing what we're doing, which is what we intended the policy to do? Or second, as suggested by some of the people who spoke tonight, do we want to require public comment? And that's not what so the intent of that change is simply to better reflect what we've been doing for as long as I've been on the board, not to make any changes. So I think if we want to consider making public comment mandatory, that's a pretty different change than what's reflected in the edits that we made that we're proposing here from the policy committee.
Yeah, my only comment, and I know it was Matt, right? Yeah, so what I wanted to share and kind of reference what Drew was saying is that the intention was to make it clear for the public, right? So we've had a lot of people come and speak and say, well, I'm confused, like, what can I speak on? What am I allowed to talk about? What am I allowed to talk on? And to me, it's making some clarity of, it'll be on the agenda, what's up for discussion. If it's an agenda item, if it's a recommendation, if it's open discussion on the topic. So the whole point was to bring additional clarity. It's really not a lot of change. I'm okay with moving it to the full board for additional conversation to make sure that we're all on the same page with it. But we don't ever want to limit what we hear from our constituents, parents, students, ever. And I'm guilty of not being a great email responder. I'm more of a phone call person. I should probably just throw my number out there, but and I'll be honest, I work a full-time job, I have a baby at home, and I don't have a family here, like, it's just me and my husband, and I have a limited window when I can get in there. And I'll be honest, I'm not the best. You can hold me accountable, you can please ping me over and over and say, I'm not hearing back from you in all caps, and I will be like, oh crap, I don't call you back, right? Or call me, I give phone numbers, right? So I like to talk on the phone, but I just want to share that you can always, the point is you can always reach us. In emails, even if we're not responding, even if you get a thank you, we're reading your emails. We take it very seriously. And yes, the public comment has flowed in terms of open-ended comment, but it's not to stop anyone from reaching out to us and letting us hear what we have to say. So I guess long-winded answer is I'm open to bringing it back, but that was the intention. It was just to make some clarity so that there is no confusion when you're coming here to speak and anyway. That's my 2 cents.
And just addition, I actually printed it out, that policy. And under H, it also says that the president or presiding officer or designee can waive the rules. So it even, in another spot, says that you wouldn't have to follow these rules. We've never done that and waived them completely and said, no, we're not gonna do this, no comment. A lot of people are saying we don't respond always to exactly what you want, and you might get the thank you for your response. Also note, earlier tonight when I read the statement, I stated a whole bunch of policies, and one of them talked about us not being able to talk about items that are currently under litigation or are imminent threat of litigation. And there are a lot of questions and comments that are coming to us from the public that I can't answer because our attorneys have said, you can't say anything on this because we're currently in court on this issue, or we're dealing with DPI on this issue. So don't think it's that we're ignoring you. We just can't say it. I can't talk about the issue. So unfortunately, that happens often. Do we want to push this off to another meeting, or do we want to make a motion to approve the other ones and then have a discussion here about this policy?
Well, I don't know, because I think we should do the correction, and then, because there are two issues, right? Number one is.
What I'm saying is segregate this one out. Is there anyone that has any other, in the past, instead of motioning to approve every one of these individually, is there any other ones anyone wants segregated? If not, is there a motion to approve all as presented with the exception of 167.3 public comment?
Yeah, that was my motion.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll second that motion.
Okay. Discussion on any of the other ones that are in there. As former chair of the policy committee, I got an email today that kind of was disturbing, and I responded back to it. But it was, how dare you throw 110 pages of policy for a board meeting at the last minute and now expect us to respond. First of all, most of the policies that you see coming before you here were not written by us. The district, because of all of the federal and state regulations and laws that affect school districts, hires a company called Neola that allows them, they write policies, they give them to us twice a year. There's 110 pages and the committee didn't get through all of them. Normally there would have been even more here, and this has been going on for years this way. It wasn't that we're trying to change a whole bunch of policies. These are just the updates that come from Neola. Then they go to our staff, and our poor staff has to work months on going through every possible change and what we're accepting and what we don't. And then they make those changes, and then they present it to the committee that goes through every one of these policies. So just so everybody knows, this is not a last minute board trying to pull away and create problems for citizens or take away people's rights. These are suggested changes coming from a policy consulting company that we pay a service to. Also know that they are wrong at times because our committee reads them all. Other boards, I think, rubber stamp them, and we have argued against them in the past, and they have then in turn in the next update changed the policy, and it was our wording that they used. So they do review it and look back at what we and other districts do change because maybe their attorneys aren't always have it perfect. So I just wanted to clarify that so everybody knows before we vote on these, that this isn't a last minute throw out. This thing goes on for 6 to 8 months. That's why there's 2 a year. And there's another one coming out in November, I think.
There'll be a spring one.
Okay, spring one.
But no, we did add one for November.
We did to continue the.
Right, you had a meeting for November for the rest of the ones you didn't get through.
I guess I would add, being new to all of this, and I am on the policy committee, and anyone is welcome to attend that meeting, and that is where we do go through every policy change by change by change. So I don't think anyone would want to sit through a full board meeting to do that at a regular board meeting, but anyone would be welcome to attend the policy committee meeting.
Yeah, there's another one in
November 10th.
Okay. Other discussion on the motion? The motion is to approve as presented, all with the exception of 167.3, which we'll talk about separately. Any other discussion?
And to table it for the motion was to table it for.
Okay, I thought you said to discuss it separately.
No. Yeah, at a later meeting.
Oh.
At the time.
Okay. I don't think that was what the second and motion.
Should we
was part
revise
of
that
was.
to the 10th if we have another meeting, otherwise we'll sit to the spring.
Well, could we?
Well, can we talk about it after this is what I thought. Let's at least talk about it and see if we can reach a consensus tonight on it. If not, then it can go back to the committee.
Yeah.
But instead of just completely tabling it.
My motion, my intent of my motion, and I believe the statement was to accept all policies as presented except for policy 167.3, which would be tabled for a month. So that the full board has a chance to weigh in, or as many board members as can make it, weigh in, see if we need to make any changes or if there's consensus.
Then someone else might make a motion that we look at it later tonight.
I would make that motion to approve everything except that one item and to table that and discuss that topic.
Tonight?
I second that.
So we do have a motion, so Kevin's motion didn't have a second. Right, but there was some clarity as to what the motion was.
Oh, agree.
So that's what I just wanna make sure.
Kevin wants to table it.
Right.
Not a minute.
And the motion there that was just made that has a second wants to at least discuss it a little tonight to see if we can reach an agreement before
And are we
possibly tabling.
able to talk about it tonight?
Yes, it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
So are we all clear? Clear as mud now? Okay, so there is a motion.
Well, we still could vote to table it.
We still could vote to
after
table it,
the
absolutely.
second-
We can't come to an
after
agreement.
this call.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so we're gonna go with this second motion. I think
We have to do it.
We have to
one at a
decide.
time. We gotta do it one at a time.
Right,
First
but-
motion has to be addressed first.
Right, but your motion, I didn't state it right when you took the second, so are you okay with your second of that motion to just automatically table it? Cause if
Now
there is.
my mind has changed, so
Cause
I
if
guess
there,
not.
so if there isn't a second, it would fail.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
right, then I would
Okay.
remove my second.
Okay, so is there a second to Kevin's motion? Okay, failing a second, Kate, did you have the motion, or whoever down there, someone made a motion?
I would make a motion to accept everything except that one policy and to discuss that policy next.
167.3.
I second that.
In a second, okay, discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Nay.
So one opposed, passes. Now, that leaves 167.3, the only one left that has not been approved. So, discussion on that. I was gonna bring up an amendment to it anyways, if it does get voted on tonight or not. It says each statement made by a participant, shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration. And it really should say not to exceed 3 minutes in duration, because past board presidents, when we had big meetings with a lot of people, limited it to 2 minutes, and that makes it sound like it has to be 3 minutes. And that's just because there's a 30-minute time period to speak. And if everyone was lined up there, which we know doesn't happen, only means 10 people get to speak. Where if there was 2 minutes, you could get more, 50% more people to speak. So, I mean, if we vote on it, I would like to have that. But other discussion on it? Is there discussion that we could do it tonight, or does it need to go back to the committee?
Now, what are your concerns, Kevin?
I think that if we all think about this policy and we make notes on it and come together and discuss it and build consensus, that I don't know if it would change, but I think we would come out with a better decision. The questions I've got, like the 3-minute policy, and you try to think of how it might be abused. And if we limit the meetings, let's say to 30 minutes, public comment section, what's to stop a person from being called and stopping to tie their shoe for 5 minutes before they get there, to start their 3 minutes? Things like that. I mean, maybe we want to think about things like this, because you wouldn't want someone who wants to speak to get stopped from speaking because someone knows who's next on the list, which we see, and causing that. I would just want to think through all these things. It hasn't happened, thankfully. Nobody's been that rude to do something like that, but you know, would we want to, for instance, say you have 3 minutes from when your name is called to give your comments? Those types of things. And I think we should think through that, because it's an important issue. A lot of people came tonight to talk about it. And I don't think we're that far off. I don't think, from hearing what your intent is, I don't think we're that far off. So I don't think it's like a universal change necessarily, but it's just thinking through it and coming back and meeting. I think leads to a better decision.
Maybe.
Well, and I do wanna ensure that there would never be a rogue board really never make it available for open comment. There needs to be at some point in time. It may not be necessarily every meeting, but personally, I would never want to limit people to never be able to talk about anything.
And that's where I went. I want it, it's not gonna be every meeting. Sometimes we have agenda items to get through and we really wanna hear other recommendations, but I do wanna have an opportunity to have open discussion. We certainly learned a lot through COVID and letting people speak to what, what they wanted, what they didn't want. I mean, that had a huge impact on what we did as a district, so I'm of the same mindset, and that was the idea that under public comment section, we could add a piece of open discussion. So I'm of that mindset too, because I don't think we should 100% limit it every single meeting for an entire year or years.
Yeah, so we could theoretically add some protection, some protective language to, insulate against a rogue board, so to speak, or something like that. The other issue, and this is kind of obvious now, is that policy is not very well written. It's kind of ambiguous, at least to some people it is, because there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of disagreement on what it actually means. If we don't take action tonight, everything just stays the way it is. So we're not really doing anything. We're not changing anything by tabling it. We're just continuing along the same track that we always have been, because that change again is not substantive. It's for clarity.
Also know we are protected against a rogue president or chair, because at any time, the rest of the board can ask that something's put on the agenda and outvote a rogue chair. The rest of the committee has that right.
But it does need board consensus, right?
Yep.
Even for an item that won't be on the agenda, I don't think.
They can bring it up at the meeting and ask that it's added to a next meeting, and it can be added, it's in one of the other, I can go look for it, it's in one of the other policies when I read it. And it's there so that you have that ability. So that's really good. And I can go look for it.
And like I said, I'm not sure there needs to be changes from what's presented tonight, but I just think we could maybe come up with more clarity and full board consensus. I'm at least one person that missed it. I don't know other board members that might have missed it. I'm not sure, but.
It was just the committee there.
3 members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this wasn't, it wasn't even like a recommended change from Neola. It was just kind of, hey, let's try to make this more user friendly because there's some confusion, and it's really all that happened. And then on the way out of that policy, we noticed, oh yeah, students aren't listed there. We always take comments from students, always have, so let's add the word student because that reflects our practice, which is what we were trying to do with this change to item G as well.
There was no intent to limit comments.
No.
Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that I think your goals were correct. It's just could we tweak it and come up with a better solution that everybody understands?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we can leave it the way it is. There's no change.
In light of the current state of all of our meetings, I think it's valuable to get input at every meeting, and maybe there's just some room for compromise there, whether it's every meeting or every other or quarterly, or maybe we just have some sort of compromise on the time spent on it, and I think the last several months we've always extended that time, and maybe that compromise is we hold fast to 30 minutes to be able to move meetings along. But I do think there is some value to having a discussion when we do get public input.
I agree, and actually, Laura was mentioned to me, maybe we need to schedule a couple of public listening sessions a year outside of the board meeting. Just have a date, we're gonna have this meeting, accept public input, we can then set it for only that item, take public input. Obviously, we can't respond on it all because it's not, open meetings law doesn't allow it, but you can set a time on that. You could say, an hour and a half, and at least then that's that, and it's not cutting into the discussions that have to happen in closed session and other things within the meeting. You can just, have that. I don't think
that's a bad idea either. The only downside is that we wouldn't know what those topics are, and it's not.
Right, but
it's
then
not
they can
required,
end up on the
so
agenda.
So we can't respond to this
Right.
listening only.
Yep.
Right, that is listening, yeah, because the others that have
But,
closed.
but at a meeting when they talk on non-agenda items, you can't talk about it either.
Right.
So,
That's why emails are more impactful, yeah.
so is there an action someone wants to make? Motion, do we wanna vote to change this? Do we want it to go back to committee? I'm looking for a motion.
Can I ask a question? So the policy that we'd be voting on doesn't really change what we do at a meeting each month. It's basically to state, Dave, maybe you can restate.
Yeah, it was just to clarify what we're doing, it would be, so if we, whether we approve these edits or not, nothing changes. It's just, we thought a better reflection of the practice so that people reading the policy would understand. So, is that your question, Kate?
Yes, so I would make a motion to pass the, policy as it is, but then also add, maybe discussion for the next agenda that we address how we take public comment or when we're gonna take public comment, so that there's consensus or of the board of how we're gonna move forward on it, because I think it is a really important issue to the community. I guess my motion would be to accept the policy as it is, understanding that that doesn't set how we run each meeting. It's more the intent of the policy, not what we implement. Is that correct?
Okay, so my question on that, what about my suggestion for not to extend the 3 minutes if we wanted to go to 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes to get more people to speak?
I would include that in the motion.
So you're making a motion to approve as presented with the change of D, to not to exceed 3 minutes of duration.
Correct.
And then ask that the committee review this again, when it goes back to committee, when they're meeting again to discuss the other policies, to make sure that they're comfortable with this, because then you can always recommend another change.
Yeah, as long as it's coming back to committee, yeah.
But you're moving to approve with that change. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll say.
Got a comment.
Discussion.
Yeah, I've got a comment item. Under G, that was brought up a couple of times today, for example, the way it reads now is participants shall address only topics noted under the public comment section of the agenda. I don't think that's correct wording. I think it's under the recommendations section of the agenda. Isn't that what we did tonight?
No, that was the idea, right? Like it's under the public comment section, it will clarify what people can speak about.
And that's the recommendations?
No,
That's-
there's a public comment section on the top of the agenda.
On the agenda.
Yeah, I can see like item 5, on the agenda today.
And it says that you can speak on section 6 recommendations BBG.
But that could say, public comment on any, topic within the jurisdiction of the board.
Yes,
Good or good? Right?
yes.
We just wanted to refer, we thought it was, more clear to refer it to the agenda.
Because things can change.
Right, I truly think I know each of the board members here, and you all have good intent. But language like this, where you tell people what they can comment on or not comment on, it's sometimes onerous. And it could be misused, somebody say, you can comment on these 2 items only. And that's not the intent, but it could be misused, so that's why I'm cautious about these changes. Just wanna make that note.
Isn't that
That's
something
how
that?
we've been doing it up until now, anyway.
That
So
could
it's
have-
not a change.
For the entire time you've been on the board.
Right, well, when I was on the board, if a member asked for something to be put on the agenda, it was. But it wasn't necessarily policy it had to be, but that's how we acted. But that doesn't really necessarily say that in our policies.
Right.
So that's how it was run for many, many decades that way. But it doesn't really say that in the policy. That's why I'm thinking, that's why I'd like us to step back and think this through and modify those things to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm not saying anybody's done anything wrong, or, I just think if we step back and look at it, we might find a better solution.
So I know we have that motion on the table for cake, but I think I kinda wanna go back to the original motion that Kevin did have and just move to table it in its entirety. I know nothing's gonna change because it's gonna continue as it is, but I think we need to just table it.
At this point, we have to vote on the motion on the floor by Robert's rules. Before we can.
That motion was to approve it as presented and then put it on the policy committee agenda for, next week.
Right, with the addition of the not exceed 3 minutes.
Okay, and the next policy committee meeting, I think, will be 2 weeks. Right.
November.
November what?
November.
10th.
So it does state to review it?
Sorry? Yeah.
They're gonna pass these changes to try to clarify it, but then also let the committee still review if they want to make other changes. Which you can do on any policy anytime.
So the next board meeting is after the policy meeting.
Yes.
So making changes wouldn't necessarily impact
Oh, yeah.
a board meeting.
That's right.
We'll do that next
It would
week.
impact the next board meeting.
Yep, exactly.
Correct.
Other discussion? If not, there's a motion on the floor. Does everybody understand the motion on the floor? We good? Motion on the floor to approve with the one change. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Yeah, for your second.
Yeah.
Career was the second. Opposed? Kevin opposed. So it passes, but the committee's gonna review it at their next meeting to see if there's other changes or clarifications that would make it better understandable.
Yep.
Okay?
And we definitely, we can improve it.
Yep, get my change. Donations.
Thanks, Ted, that was pretty exciting. The last item for the board to take action on tonight is the approval of donations. There are 3 donations that we're asking the board to approve on the consent agenda. The first is a donation of $1,014.75 from Thorson PTO. The donation used for playground equipment for Thorson Elementary School. Next donation is the amount of $600 from the Thorson PTO that would be used for the Thorson Green Squad by purchasing outside planter boxes for Thorson Elementary School. And the last donation, the amount of $1,000 from Mel's Charity. Donation will be used to support Alyssa Dorfler Scholarship at Cedarburg High School.
Move to approve as presented.
Okay.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimous. Committee reports. Policy committee.
We've covered everything.
Did you have a meeting? Personnel and finance.
That was all in front as well.
That's been covered as well. Is there a motion to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the government body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategies to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved pursuant to 19.851G of the Wisconsin statute, pupil discrimination complaint and special education. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. We will go into closed session. It's anticipated the board may convene in open session, may take action on one or more of these. But I don't think it's.
Thank you.